Have you ever wondered what eyebrow pencil to use, what shade to use, or how to find the anatomical shape of your eyebrows? In this video, I'm going to show you how to shade your eyebrows using simple makeup products and how to map out your eyebrows based on your facial anatomy. If you've always wanted to achieve the perfect brow, then keep watching. Okay, so before I teach you how to style your eyebrows, let's first talk about how to establish the boundaries of your eyebrows, because without establishing and understanding the anatomical boundaries of your personal eyebrows, it'll be really challenging to style them effectively. Eyebrows are part of your facial anatomy. They're not one size fits all. They're not cookie cutter. I don't believe in stencils. I currently own an eyebrow studio in Miami, Florida, and these tips I'm bringing you today are based on the questions that my clients ask me on a daily basis. It doesn't matter what products you use. These happen to be eyebrow products. We have eyebrow pencils over the counter. We have high-end department store. But way back in the 90s when I started styling eyebrows, I used a good old eyeshadow palette, because at the end of the day, it's all pigment. So don't be seduced by brands, by what influencers tell you. If you have a brown, taupe, whatever the color of your eyebrow is, pigment, you'll be just fine. I'm just gonna get a regular eyebrow pencil. This one happens to be NYX. And first we're going to establish the 3 points of your eyebrows. There are 3 points of the eyebrows and 4 lines of the eyebrows. Again, this is based on your anatomical shape, your specific eyebrow blueprint. So what you wanna do is place the pencil next to our nose, go up, and this is exactly where your eyebrow should start. Again, this is based on the anatomical shaping of your brow. This is brow shaping, brow styling based on the blueprint of your eyebrow, the anatomical blueprint. So this is where your eyebrow should start. Now, I'm a product of the 80s, the 70s and 80s, actually. I'm 55. And so in the 80s and 90s, actually, I over tweezed like crazy. Thankfully, my genetics are such that my eyebrows did come back, but eventually eyebrows don't come back. And I do have a lot of sparse areas. I will show you that in a minute. And this is a huge pain point that my clients come to me every single day, is years and years of over removal, over waxing, over tweezing have rendered their eyebrows sparse. Okay, so I digress. So we've determined where the eyebrow starts. Let's see where the eyebrow ends. A corner of the nose this time to the corner of the eye. So corner of the nose to the corner of the outer canthus of the eye. And then we're gonna bring that pencil up, and that's where the eyebrow should end. So with that said, if this is where the eyebrow should start, I have a lot of clients whose eyebrows start over here or even over here, because back in the day, they succumbed to generational brow trends. So trends from celebrities or magazines, pencil thin eyebrows, Studio 54 brows, whatever the case was, or even experimental, right? Experimenting with tweezers at home in your home mirror, and they removed all these eyebrows, or they went to someone for threading or for waxing that was inexperienced, didn't understand brow anatomy, didn't understand the idea of anatomical brow shaping, and they over removed. So I like to consider eyebrows to be like a garden, 2 floating flower gardens, if you will. So when you go into a salon for brow shaping, or if you sit in front of your mirror and do it yourself, we are simply removing the weeds from the garden. So we want to keep these flowers in place. We don't want to remove the essential flowers. We want to simply remove the weeds. So if we have hairs down here, we don't want them. These are undesirable hairs, like that sort of unibrow. We want to get rid of that. But the question that most of my clients come to me with is, what eyebrows do I remove? I don't understand, especially when it comes to like right around the fringe, close to the eyebrows. They just don't know which eyebrows to remove. So we know where the eyebrow starts. We know where the eyebrow should end. And on my eyebrows, it's pretty obvious where the arch is. It's right here. A really easy way to determine your arch is find the point of your forehead where it starts to curve. So if you put 2 fingers in the middle of your forehead, this is the flat part of your forehead. And if you slowly bring your fingers across your forehead, I could close my eyes. I could sort of feel where my forehead starts to curve. At the point where it starts to curve, and for me, it's right here, I could feel it. You go directly down, that's where the arch should be. and that is exactly where my arch is. It's not rocket science, but it's important to determine where the 3 points of the eyebrow are. Now that we know where the 3 points of the brow are, we're going to determine the 4 lines of the brow. Every eyebrow on the planet, for the most part, have the same growth patterns. In other words, if I took my eyebrows with a spoolie brush and if I brushed them downward, all these hairs grow down. So my eyebrows will just sort of sit where I place them. A lot of eyebrows are downward dominant, but nevertheless, the top line grows down. So in other words, if I brush all these eyebrows down, and I'm gonna flip over to my magnification part of my mirror, I can see exactly, sort of in a coloring book when you're connecting the dots, like when you're a kid, you can sort of see, I could see where all these, like right here, I could draw a straight line where all the hairs are sort of growing from the follicle right here. Over here in this spot, I'm missing. This is all just skin. This is all hair that's been compromised. I should have hair here, but I don't because I grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So I succumbed to those generational brow trends. Let me just take a little Q-tip to rub that off. So we know where the 3 points of the brow and the 4 lines of the brow, you need to understand that those are straight lines. They're straight. So if I brushed all these hairs downward, and if I'm starting at the first point of the brow, you want to connect point 1 to the arch. So literally, I can see these hairs are intact. I could see where they're sort of growing downward. There's a line, and I know where the point is. I just don't have any hairs here to follow. I don't have a sort of dotted line to connect, but I can use an imaginary line. So I'm gonna take my imaginary line and I'm just gonna connect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I just want to know more or less where that line is. That's line 1 of the brow. And I'm gonna make it a little darker just for the purpose of this demonstration. Okay, so now line 2 is the top of the brow. So where the arch sits to where that 3rd point of the brow, that's line 2. Again, it's a straight line. So the 4 lines of the brow are straight. Line 1 is where the brow starts to where the arch. Line 2 is where the arch sits to the top of the tail, right there. Now the underside of the brow, these hairs grow up. I've been doing eyebrows for over 30 years, since the early 90s. And I have never met a brow that does not have these growth patterns. Some individuals have downward dominant brows, particularly Asian cultures, but for the most part, every brow has the same pattern. So I'm almost certain yours does as well. So this top line goes up. I call this the top line. So line 1 and line 2, that consists of that top line of the brow. So this underside, I'm gonna brush up. I'm gonna brush in a northern direction. So this is the underside of the brow. This is the bottom line, what I call the bottom line of the brow. So same theory applies. Where point 1, I'm gonna connect point 1 to the underside of point 2. And on me, these hairs are not as compromised as my top line, meaning the brow trends that I succumbed to back in the 80s and 90s in particular, where I created a really pencil thin eyebrow. Luckily, most of my hair did grow back, because I can tell you with 100% certainty that eyebrow hairs are temperamental and they typically do not grow back. And you know this if you contact your great Aunt Sue or your grandmother or your mother or some more mature person in your family. Perhaps you watching this right now have compromised eyebrows because back in the day you took advantage of some generational brow trends. I consider eyebrows part of the anatomy. So I always tell my clients, if the trend was to have a large nose, would you go to the plastic surgeon and get a nose implant? Absolutely not. So the same theory applies to eyebrows. Trends are great for hair, for fashion, experimenting with makeup, but not when it comes to altering the shape of your brows. So circling back to the underside, that bottom line of the eyebrow, we're going to very lightly sketch a line. Again, connecting the dots. I can see where all the lines connect. It's pretty easy to see the line from the underside of where the brow starts to the underside of that arch. That's line 3. And then line 4, the underside of the arch where the brow ends, that is line 4. For the most part, When clients come to me with compromised eyebrows, I'd say at least 80% of the time they're compromised here. It almost looks like a tadpole. So it's like you have this little bulb here and then it goes up like a number 7. It goes up and then over. I see this underside of the brow compromised all the time with clients. The second part that I see that's compromised is this bulb area. A lot of eyebrows are typically missing from the bulb. Either clients have very sparse brows or no brows at all. In my practice, I also tattoo eyebrows. I practice permanent makeup, but I always consider permanent makeup as a last resort. I never want to permanently implant color in a client's brows before putting them on a brow growth plan. And that's an entirely separate conversation because sometimes brows are dormant, the hairs are sleeping or hibernating. And I love to place my clients on a brow growth plan to see how we can awaken that follicle and to see if we can get the brows on track before we sort of commit to that permanent solution. There is a solution, right? Permanent makeup is a solution, but another solution is me perhaps teaching clients some makeup tips, right? How to fill in those sparse areas, or perhaps a temporary solution, like a temporary tint. And I'm gonna address that in another video because my eyebrows right now are full of grays. So I would love to show you how I tint the grays, how I tint the grays of my clients' eyebrows. And by doing that, you're temporarily staining that underlying skin. So you sort of have that wake up with makeup effect that lasts a few days. It's a temporary solution. It's not a permanent commitment. And it's a great way to lean into permanent makeup if you are considering it. But I digress. There's so much to talk about when it comes to eyebrows. It's my passion. It's what I built my career, my over 3-decade career on. So I could literally talk about this for hours. So, okay, so that's it. We've mapped out the brow. It's pretty simple. We determined the 3 points of the eyebrow, where the eyebrow starts, where the arch is, where the eyebrow ends. And then by determining those 3 points, we have found where the 4 lines of the brow are. And this top line grows downward. I'm creating line 1 by connecting point 1 and point 2. I'm creating line 2 of the brow by connecting point 2 and point 3. And then I'm going to brush these under the underside of this brow up. Then I'm going to determine the bottom line of the brow, which again, connecting the dots, point 1 to point 2, I'm creating that line. This is line 3 of the brow, and line 4 is the underside of the arch to the tail. That is line 4. Just by creating those 4 lines, by the way, and I'm brushing my hair in place, do you see how this eyebrow is not as finished as this eyebrow? Do you see how this eyebrow is more finished? It's subtle, but it makes a huge impact. So that's one way to fill in your eyebrow. If you want to simply, very lightly with a pencil, just map out the 4 lines of the eyebrow. Earlier, I showed you where the 3 points were, and I created little dots. You obviously don't want to have dots, so I'm going to take a little cotton swab to sort of erase the dots. You basically just want to sort of show the lines. And the great thing about pencils like these, and most eyebrow pencils do come with a spoolie like this on the other end. Most of them do. You want to use that spoolie to sort of blend the product in. So you don't want any harsh lines in the brow. I created the lines of the brow for purposes of shaping. If I wanted to shape the eyebrows at this point, after I've determined the boundaries with the lines, before I continue blending, I can take my tweezer and I simply tweeze around the boundaries. So these are the hairs that you remove. Anything that's beyond the boundaries, anything that is beyond the fringe of those 4 lines that you have drawn in, that is basically brow shaping 101. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but if you want an easy way to learn how to shape your eyebrows, first learn where the boundaries of your eyebrows sit based on the anatomical shape of your brow. But I'm not going to do that today. That's a topic for another video. I'm going to right now take another spoolie brush because it's a little bigger, it's a little sturdier. I'm simply going to blend in those lines that I created just to create a nice soft effect. I don't want any harsh lines. And I do have those grays that are unsightly, and I can tackle that in one of 2 ways. I can grab an eyebrow tint, a tinted gel for the eyebrows, and simply paint the product onto my eyebrows, which I'm gonna do right now. Or sometimes when I'm doing my mascara, if I have 1 or 2 strays, I'll take a clean brush. I never want to take my mascara wand. This is not mascara, but let's say I was applying mascara. and I see a little gray, I can very easily touch my eyebrow and fill in those few grays, but I don't want to contaminate my mascara wand because there's makeup and dust and other particles on my brow that I don't want to contaminate this with. So what I do is I take a clean brush, any little brush, it doesn't matter. It could even be a toothpick, but you want to take something clean, swipe it onto the mascara, and then at that point you can sort of paint those gray hairs. I like to go against the grain. It's easier to fill in those sporadic grays when you're going against the grain so that you're lifting the hairs. It's easier to tint them. So let it dry before you brush them in place. But that's pretty much it. That's how you determine the anatomical shape of your eyebrow. Eyebrows, they say they're not sisters, they're twins, but guess what? We have the ability to make them twins. I don't want sisters on my face. I want twins on my face. So whether it's with understanding where my boundaries lie, understanding how to manipulate the shape of my eyebrows using simple makeup products is a game changer. Now on this eyebrow, another simple way to shade in my brow is to use an eyeshadow palette. When I started shaping eyebrows back in the 90s, we didn't have a huge assortment of the high-end brow products that you can see today on the market, like Anastasia Beverly Hills. What I loved to use was a good old-fashioned brush and a good old-fashioned eyeshadow palette. I invite you to look at makeup as pigment. Don't view this as an eyeshadow palette, view this as pigment. So I can certainly apply this as eyeshadow, and this is a Makeup by Mario palette, but I could also use this as an eyeliner. I could wet my brush, I can pick up some pigment, and it will act great as an eyeliner. I could use a dry brush and pick up some of these lighter brown shades, and I could fill in my brows. I could line my lips, I could use it as a contour. So now it's not eyeshadow any longer, now it's pigment. I'm gonna take this clean brush, and this is just an e.l.f. eyeshadow brush. This is a dense brush, it's not a fluffy brush. I wanna use a dense brush because I want control in my eyebrow, and I never recommend dipping or loading your brush in product and applying it directly to your face. You always wanna blot. I'm not a fan of this because makeup is dirty and it gets all over. I always do my makeup, whether it's my full face makeup application or just my eyebrows. I always have a clean paper towel on hand. It's here, it's out of the camera's view. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to dip my eyebrow brush in these two colors right here, just medium brown, very light brown colors. And I'm going to blot it on my paper towel. So I blot it maybe 4 or 5 times. I have little dots on my paper towel right now. So there's no rules for anything. You do whatever you want. There are really no rules for makeup or eyebrows. However, there are rules for shaping because, as I mentioned earlier, eyebrow hairs eventually don't come back, and you don't want that. I've built a 30-year business based on the solutions that I bring to clients that come to me with over tweezed eyebrows, because when we know we look better, we feel better, right? Eyebrows frame the face. They're the quintessential pillars of the face. So it's important. It's a big deal. When clients come to me, many times in tears because they went to someone that didn't know what they were doing, they over tweezed, over waxed, and they come to me to help them get their eyebrows on track. I take that very seriously. So anyhow, I'm gonna go on this eyebrow because this eyebrow has the pencil that I just showed you a moment ago. This one is already loaded with the light brown. So when it comes to picking your color, by the way, if I'm gonna really sort of kick it up a notch and be intentional with my brow shaping, I'm gonna use 2 colors. I never like to use one color with anything, whether I'm applying my foundation, whether I'm applying my lipstick. I usually use 2 products because I love makeup. I know what products work best for me when I blend them. But to make it easier for you, if you're gonna pick one color, pick a color that is 1 or 2 shades lighter than your eyebrow. But in a perfect world, if I were doing my eyebrows, I would pick that same lighter brown shade. I would scrub it in my brows all over, which I'm doing it right now. No rhyme or reason, I'm just scrubbing the color in my brows. And by the way, if you're a little heavy-handed, if you didn't blot enough and it's going on too dark, just get a little Q-tip. You could rub it out, maybe dip it in a little witch hazel or even makeup remover, micellar water, and just rub it out. It's just makeup, it's not permanent. But let me put my magnification mirror here because I can't see. And I'm just scrubbing my eyebrows right now, like you're scrubbing the floor, if you will. You're scrubbing, scrubbing, scrubbing. I could hear my hairs, the friction of my hair. You're scrubbing that color in the eyebrow. You want to take your spoolie brush. I'm gonna brush them in place. And that's good. You can call it a day at this point. You could put a little brow gel on it. You could just walk out of the house. You're doing this, you're applying the pigment because you're filling in those sparse areas, those areas that have been compromised. Sometimes clients come to me and they've never touched their eyebrows. Perhaps it's a younger client in her 20s or even her teens, and just genetically, she just has areas that are sparse. It doesn't necessarily have to be trauma caused by generational brow trends. It could just be the way your eyebrows are. They're lacking density in certain areas that you need more density. So that is ultimately the goal of any makeup product, is you're creating density in the brows. So we're creating density right here with eyeshadow. And then I'm using a spoolie brush. This spoolie brush I probably got at a makeup show. There's no name on it. Maybe it's a crown brush, but it doesn't matter. It can be a disposable spoolie brush. I use those in my office. And you can see the difference. Where I sort of scrub the brow is a little bit more dense, particularly here on the bulb area, than this where I just sort of lightly outlined those 4 lines, then blended it in with my spoolie brush. There's some sparse areas here, which is sort of nice. It creates dimension. In a perfect world, my favorite kind of eyebrow is a sort of gradient brow. You don't want a Sharpie marker brow. You want it a little bit lighter, a little bit less dense here. You want the density to sort of evolve and grow as you get into the tail. But to set the tone of the eyebrow, to really make them pop, you want to use that darker color. The first step was to use those lighter tones. I blotted it on my paper towel. I scrubbed it throughout the brow, and I filled in that density. But I'm gonna kick it up a notch right now. I'm gonna use a little bit of facial spray. It doesn't matter. You could use water, but you want to wet your brush. And so any good pigment can be used wet. So I'm gonna lightly tap this dark brown color right here. I'm just gonna tap it. I'm not gonna swirl it. I'm gonna tap it. Even the first time with that lighter color, I just tapped it. This particular palette is really concentrated. Again, I've loaded my brush, but I'm not gonna go directly into my eyebrow. I'm gonna tap my paper towel twice. And the underside of the brow is where you want the most density. So right in here. So I'm using that dark brown color right here on that sort of 3 and 4 line, right? So like midway through line 3 and into line 4. So remember, we have lines 1 and 2 on top, and then line 3 is the underside, line 4 is the underside. We're gonna start right here into the arch and into the tail. So that's really where I want that sort of darkest color to be. And I just achieved that with shadow. If I wanted to do it here on this brow with a little pencil, I'm gonna take that same NYX color that I used on the original eyebrow, but this time I'm not gonna use such a light hand, because when I used those 4 lines, I used a pretty light hand and then I blended it in. This time I'm gonna use a little bit of a firmer hand, short little strokes. That's, in my opinion, how you achieve the best control, is to do little short strokes. And I always like to extend the tail, even if it's a 1/4 millimeter, just a little bit. I have a lot of hair, and I'll tell you why. Yes, genetically, my eyebrows are good. They look this way because I feed them every day with the brow growth serum, and I'll talk about that in another video. But even if I didn't use my brow growth serum every day, I'd still have good eyebrows, but they're so much better now because I do use that serum. And if you recall, before I had makeup on, I brushed these hairs down. There was nothing but skin up there. And if you're wondering if I have permanent makeup, since I'm a cosmetic tattooist, yes, I did at one time, I tattoo my own eyebrows, but because I use retinoids and retinol every day, over time that has faded my eyebrows. I have hair. I enjoy the art of growing my brow garden, if you will. And I actually love sitting here in front of the mirror every day and applying my brow makeup. Now, if I had no eyebrows, that's another conversation. Then I would sort of commit more to my eyebrow permanent makeup touch-ups. I do have permanent makeup eyeliner on, and in future videos, you'll see me with no makeup on, and you'll see what an impact and a game changer that is, having permanent eyeliner manner. So I hope you learned something today. I know firsthand that eyebrow shaping, styling can be intimidated. I know this because clients ask me questions all the time. Eyebrows frame the face. They're the quintessential pillars of the face, and they add youth to the face. So thank you for your gift of time. Have a great day. Mwah. Ciao for now.